Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Pointy Not Sharp. Today we're actually taking a look at a rifle. So we're down here at the Lone Pine Barracks Infantry Museum, where they've been kind enough to let me take a look at some of the items in their collection. So today we're going to go through the F88 family as well as the accompanying bayonets. So prior to the F88, in Australia we were using the L1A1 SLR, which was a large rifle in 7.62 NATO. But in the late 70s, we started looking for a replacement. And initially, there were quite a few contenders, like the AR-180 and the Leader Dynamic Series T2 Mark V, but none of them even made it to trial. By 1985, we got it down to two rifles, being the Steyr AUG A1 and the M16 A2. And it should be noted that at the time, we already had the M16 A1 in service in a very limited capacity. Now, the results of that trial have actually been uploaded to The Cove, and I'll post links to them down in the description. You can have a read of it yourself. It's a fantastic read, very interesting trial. And the result of it was that the Steyr won against what they called the Colt, being the M16A2. The results are a bit different compared to some of the other trials held in the US. For some reason, the M16 performed quite poorly. But as a result, the Steyr was chosen, and in 1988 it was formally adopted and named as the F88. Now, since then there's been a lot of rumours about why the Steyr won over the M16. You'll hear all of the Australian diggers spouting rumours like licensing issues, that they wouldn't let us make the M16, that's why we got this, or that the guy who made the decision ended up getting $1 million job with Steyr. I don't believe these rumours. I believe that's just what they are, but they've been prolific over the last 20 years, and I've heard them repeated so many times. Now, the F88 was initially received in 1991, because it did take a couple of years for them to be produced, and they were actually produced at the Small Arms Factory in Lithgow, and that's a factory that was initially a state-owned arms manufacturer, founded in 1912. They started making the SMLE, then later the SLR, and then in 83 to 91 they were corporatised into ADI, Australian Defence Industries, and later they were sold to Thales, the giant French company, in 2006. But there were a whole bunch of different versions of the F88. So what we have here is just the standard F88 with the 1.5 sight on it. We call it the donut sight because it's got a sight picture that has essentially just a cross with a donut in the middle. But on top of just the F88, there were a whole bunch of other versions of this rifle that were also adopted. So we also had the F88T, which was a training version of the rifle in .22 long rifle. That was adopted in 1991. In 1993, we got the F88S, which had a Accuracy International mounting system, or AIMS system, for mounting different optics. Because as you can see here, we've just got a fixed sight, and there's not much you can really do with that. We also had the F88C. So the F88C was a carbine version of the rifle. So while the regular one had a 20-inch barrel, the carbine only had a 16-inch barrel, which, you know, being a bullpup, is still a very generous barrel. And there were actually two versions of the carbine. There was the standard carbine, and then there was the F88C 3RAR. So 3RAR was an airborne parachute unit, and theirs had the addition of a bayonet lug as well, because you'll see the standard carbines like this one here don't have a bayonet lug. Now, these rifles have a whole bunch of different attachments that can attach to them. So you got like blank firing attachments, slings, all that kinds of things. And over the years, we have had a couple of different blank firing attachments, but for the initial F88, we just had a small little screw-in one in the end. Later, with the subsequent rifles, we have the bullet trap BFA, which is a big chunky one that goes on the end. In 2003, we got the F88 SA1, and the major upgrade here was the addition of a Picatinny rail, so we could swap out the sights. And at the time, the Wildcat sight was reasonably common, and as well as like the night weapon sight. So they're the two sights you'd use with the SA1. Now, when I joined the army back in 2008, this is the rifle that I was initially issued. Later I used other versions, but I thoroughly enjoyed using it. One thing I should point out is the smaller the butt here, you don't have that on the later versions of the rifles. So initially we used to use our slings in like a urban configuration by wrapping it around the small of the butt and attaching it back here to this sling swivel. Later, We have a sling swivel attached to the back of the Picatinny rail on the next rifle, and then we use different sling systems after that as well. In 2009, we got the F88 SA2. This was my favourite version of the Steyr. When I was issued these in an infantry unit, we didn't use the tan sight up here. We had ACOGs with red dots at the top, and you'll see we now have the sling swivel at the back of the Picatinny rail. Double-edged sword though, because it was fantastic for using for urban, but then when you're reassembling the rifle, you have to insert the receiver into the buttstock, and always got caught, so you always had to pull it out of the way prior to reassembly. It was a little bit annoying. But the main differences were a modified gas system for reliability, enlarged ejection port to make it a little bit easier to eject. We now have a better mounting system for, well, a rail that goes in there for attaching night aiming devices, the urban sling mount, and obviously the two-tone colour as well. And this also included a change to the magazines. So this is an older magazine with the older colour. The SA2 had sort of this lighter green on the base of the magazine. In my opinion, this was peak Steyr. I absolutely loved it. I actually discharged while we were still using these, and shortly after I left, we moved over to the F88. So in 2012, we started trials of at the time we called it the F90, and I did a year with one area. We did trials there. Lithgow came down with a bunch of rifles, and they were in this configuration in that they had the two-tone, they weren't black. And we did a bunch of trials, told them what we did and didn't like. And then in 2014, 2015, they started issuing small numbers of F90s to units to get soldiers qualified prior to the rollout of the EF88 in 2016. When the EF88 came out, it was a very different rifle to what we had in the trials. For starters, it was completely black and had a longer rail running like the full length. It was significantly longer. We have a, how do I describe it? The back of the butt rises up and connects to the back of the Picatinny rail, so you don't have sharp edges or anything back here. We have a lightened fluted barrel. We have a folding cocking handle. So while the cocking handle here is fixed, on the EF88 it folds up, which is a nice feature. Got another extended ejection port, so it's a little bit bigger again. And it also comes with a bolt release on the back around here, just like the Steyr AEG A3 does. So a lot of improvements on that. It also has an improved grenade launcher attachment. So the Steyrs, the F88, SA1 and SA2 had a big chunky GLA grenade launcher attachment that sat underneath the barrel, and it rattled a bit, and it wasn't a great fix, great solution. Whether the EF88 has one that sits really snug and actually has a trigger system that comes in through the trigger guard here and sits inside here. So it's a pretty good solution. I never got to use one, but they look pretty sweet. The F88 also comes standard with the Spectre sight. So again, fantastic solution. Looks like a great rifle. But that's sort of the history of the evolution. I hear that Defence are looking at replacing the F88 in the near future, so whatever they replace that with, be that the Sig Spear, a new iteration of the Steyr, who knows. But I'm sure they'll come up with something pretty good. Anyway, that's the history. We'll jump into the bayonets very quick. So initially, during trials, they had the KCB 77 bayonet. That didn't last long. In 1991, it was replaced by, first, the M7 for training. In my opinion, one of the best bayonets out there. And operationally, we have the M9 bayonet as well. This one's a bit beaten up. The tip's been broken off, but definitely Australian issue. We've got our broad arrow down there. It's also got a Dobie number on the back, which is a number for identifying equipment to soldiers. Consists of the first three letters from the name and the last three numbers of the soldier's number. Now, we're still using the M9 bayonet with the EF88s now, as well as the M7s. So my understanding is when you have blank fire attachments fixed to the rifle, you pretty much have to use the M7 because the M9 will not fit. So generally you see the M7 in training, and I think the M9s are more reserved for operational role if they get used at all. So finally we'll jump into the handling of the EF88 or the F88. Because it's a museum piece, I can't disassemble it or cock it or anything like that, but I can certainly show you the controls. So to cock the weapon, we have our cocking handle on the left hand side up here. It's got a bolt assist on the rear, although I've never found it particularly effective. We've got a folding foregrip, and we've got a adjustable gas plug. So you've got a couple of different gas settings too, I think, normal and adverse gas. Adverse for when you start getting gas stoppages. We've got our safety catch just down here, set to safe, set to fire. And we've also got a barrel removal lug up here. So to remove the barrel, you cock the weapon, lock it up to the rear, push down that, and the barrel will slide out, and you can replace the barrel or clean it or disassemble it, whatever you're doing. Initially the Steyr was developed with a bunch of different barrel configurations, so short carbine barrels, long light machine gun barrels, things like that. We never actually saw that used. So I should probably point out another difference with the EF88 is they removed that feature and the barrel is now locked to the receiver. So there's only three major parts, being butt group, bolt group, and barrel receiver. So to disassemble it, first you would render it safe. You'd remove your magazine, render it safe. I need to go through that, look through the ejection port, make sure there's nothing in there. And then you'd remove your barrel. You'd depress this button here, and that would push out the other side of the rifle, and you can separate your butt from the receiver with your bolt group inside. The disassembly is the same as every other Steyr out there, so I don't need to get into that. If you want to see it, check out some other videos online. In terms of markings, we've got a couple. So we've got a Lithgow marking down here on the butt. That's our manufacturer marking, and it's got the model F88. We have, I'm going to blur out the serial numbers so you can't see them at the request of defence, but we've got a serial number on the bolt group, the sight, the barrel, and under the receiver. And other markings, we've got our broad arrow, proof mark, and inspection mark here under the barrel. I'll put a photo of those up so you can see. We've got GR, which I assume is gas regulator or something like that, behind the gas. And last marking we have is an MA, just here under the foldable foregrip, MA being the abbreviation for Lithgow. Defence rifles also have classification tags, pretty much just showing that they've been inspected by armourers and they are safe to use, essentially. But those are the controls and the markings. There's not really anything further to show about the weapon. When I was in, a lot of people disliked it, and I put that down to the fact that they hadn't handled other weapons. I always found it to be fantastic. Most Australian soldiers have no exposure to other weapons at all, and everything they do know about other weapons either comes from video games or the internet. And a lot of the content online comes from America, where people dislike bullpups because they've grown up with AR-15s. So you find a lot of Australian soldiers disliked the Steyr based on what they read on the internet when they had no experience. I've shot a lot of different rifles. I've shot AR platforms, G36, FAMAS, just about everything, and I've got to say the F88 is a fantastic rifle. And the new EF88s, I've been to the Lithgow Small Arms factory and seen the manufacturing that goes into them. It's state of the art. They're using the best French steel barrel blanks. They're using hammer forged machines. The whole place is automated with cutting edge technology, so absolutely fantastic rifle. Anyway guys, that's all I've got to say. Thanks for watching, and if I made any mistakes, please feel free to correct me down in the comments, and I'll see you next time.